In this new two-part series, I'm going to highlight some of the places, concepts, and historical events that people have mentioned in the comments section of my blog and YouTube channel. The first part of the series is focused on physical locations that have been suggested by readers and viewers. My name is Michelle Gibson. More and more, what I am finding in my research is pointing to the Victorian era as the start of the new historical reset timeline, following what I believe was a mud flood cataclysm that was deliberately caused by negative beings who sought absolute power and control over humanity and the earth. After the mud flood, they dug enough infrastructure out of the mud with which to restart civilization, according to a plan these beings already had in mind. I have already spoken of my belief in past videos that the Great Exhibition of the Works of Industry of all nations was the official kickoff of the New World Order timeline, and held in the Crystal Palace in London between May 1st and October 15th of 1851. We are told that it took only 9 months to develop the Great Exhibition, from plans and organization, including the construction of the Crystal Palace itself to house the exhibition. Opened by Queen Victoria, the Great Exhibition of 1851 in the Crystal Palace has been characterized as a celebration of modern industrial technology and design. It is important to note that Queen Victoria's reign began on June 20th of 1837, and her reign has been described as a period of cultural, industrial, political, scientific, and military change within the United Kingdom, marked by a great expansion of the British Empire, lasting for almost 64 years until her death on January 22nd of 1901. So I chose the recommendation of the Balmoral Cairns in Scotland as my starting point for this video. The Balmoral Castle on the Balmoral estate has been one of the residences of the British royal family since 1852, at which time the castle and estate was purchased from the Farquharson family by Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband. There are 11 what are called stone cairns erected on the Balmoral estate to commemorate members of the British royal family and events in their lives, the majority of which were said to have been erected by Queen Victoria. At this point, it is really important to get the definition of cairn and pyramid before I look at some of the Balmoral cairns in Scotland. A cairn is defined as a mound or heap of stones built as a memorial or landmark on a hilltop or skyline. The following examples are identified as cairns. The definition of a pyramid, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, which was established in 1828, is 1. An ancient massive structure found especially in Egypt, having typically a square ground plan, outside walls in the form of 4 triangles that meet in a point at the top, and inner sepulchral chambers. 2. A structure or object of similar form. And 3. A polyhedron having for its base a polygon and for faces triangles with a common vertex. This is a photo of the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. Now back to the Balmoral cairns. We are told that the largest of the Balmoral cairns, shown here, was erected in memory of Queen Victoria's husband, Prince Albert, after his death on December 14th of 1861. It certainly looks like the definition of a pyramid. Look at all the lichen growing on Prince Albert's cairn. Somewhere in the past, I remember hearing that lichen grows very slowly, so I looked it up to be certain. Other cairns on the Balmoral estate include Princess Helena's cairn, the 5th child of Victoria and Albert, said to have been erected to commemorate her marriage to the Marquis of Lorne in 1871. The cairn of Prince Leopold, the 8th child and youngest son of Victoria and Albert, erected in 1882 to commemorate his marriage. Born in April of 1853, Prince Leopold was a hemophiliac who died in March of 1884 at the young age of 30. While considered relatively rare in the general population, hemophilia is an inherited bleeding disorder in which the blood does not clot properly and is prevalent in Europe's royal families, thereby gaining the nickname the royal disease, with the hemophilia gene said to have passed from Queen Victoria to the ruling families of Russia, Spain, and Germany. The presence of the hemophilia gene in Queen Victoria was said to have been caused by a spontaneous mutation, as she is considered the source of the disease in modern cases of hemophilia among her descendants. This is Prince Arthur's cairn, the seventh child of Victoria and Albert, said to have been erected to mark his marriage in 1870. In addition to other cairns marking events in the lives of Queen Victoria's family, we are told that a cairn was constructed in 2012 on the Balmoral estate to mark the Diamond Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II in 2012. While these last four of the Balmoral cairns seem to have more of the appearance of what are called cairns than what can also be called Prince Albert's Pyramid, the question becomes this: were the Balmoral cairns built when they were said to have been built by who was said to have built them? Or were they built by an ancient advanced civilization of master builders missing from our collective awareness for purposes unknown to us in the present day? I am seeing notation of obelisks as well on the map I just showed of the Balmoral estates, and one of them is another monument to Queen Victoria's husband, the Prince Consort Albert, said to have been erected in 1862 and photographed by George Washington Wilson, a pioneering Scottish photographer who got his start as a portrait miniaturist in 1849 and switched to portrait photography in 1852 and received the contract to photograph the royal family of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. What role do photographers and artists play in programming our perception away from what is actually in the environment into seeing only the preferred narrative? From what I am seeing, photographers and artists play a substantial role in the process of reinventing history. This is a photo of George Washington Wilson's of Princes Street in Edinburgh, circa 1860, with the contrast of massive, stately, columned architecture, cobbled streets, and horse and buggies in the foreground, and Calton Hill in the background, with a view of what is called the Nelson Monument and the National Monument of Scotland. The Nelson Monument was said to have been built on the highest point on Calton Hill between 1807 and 1816 to commemorate the British Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson's victory over the French and Spanish fleets at the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. The National Monument of Scotland is a national memorial to the Scottish soldiers and sailors who died fighting in the Napoleonic Wars, which took place between 1803 and 1815. With a design by Charles Robert Cockerell and William Henry Playfair based on the Parthenon in Athens, construction was said to have started in 1826, and that it was left unfinished in 1829 due to lack of funds. It is interesting to note that in this view of Calton Hill, you see the Nelson Monument perfectly framed through the center of the front colonnade of the National Monument. Another commenter from Scotland mentioned Glasgow in particular. Glasgow called itself the second city of the British Empire, passing Edinburgh in population by 1821, and that in the 1830s it started to become a major industrial center. The University of Glasgow, established in 1451, is one of Scotland's four ancient universities, along with Edinburgh, Aberdeen, and St. Andrew. Universities that received the designation ancient universities in Great Britain were founded before the year 1600 and considered among the oldest existing universities in the world. For some reason, I have consistently found that the word ancient is used to describe places that are not associated with the far distant past that the word ancient is defined as. The oldest currently functional universities in the world are in North Africa. The Al-Qarawiyyin University in Fez dates back to 859 AD. Interesting to note that the archway shown here at the University in Fez on the left frames the larger building in much the same way that the archway does here at the University of Oxford in England on the right. The University of Oxford was established in 1096 and is the oldest of the ancient universities of Great Britain. Also, the colonnaded courtyard at the University in Fez in Morocco on the left looks very similar in appearance to the courtyard of the Alhambra in Granada, Spain on the right, which is architecture that the Moors are actually given credit for. Tunisia's still functioning university in Kairouan is said to date from between 800 AD and 909 AD. Back to the University of Glasgow. James Watt was a mathematical instrument maker at the University of Glasgow before he became interested in the technology of steam engines. His improvement of the steam engine invented by Thomas Newcomen in 1712 with his Watt steam engine in 1776 was said to have been crucial to the changes brought by the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain and the rest of the world. You know, I can't help but wonder about the origin of steam engine technology when I see examples of the big gear wheel showing on the right at what is called a sugar mill in Belize, with what appears to be an ancient tree firmly rooted inside the structure, compared with the Watt steam engine on the left. Adam Smith was a student at the University of Glasgow. He was a key figure of the Scottish Enlightenment, a period during the late 18th and early 19th centuries, during which time there was an outpouring of Scottish intellectual and scientific accomplishments. Known as the father of capitalism and the father of economics, Adam Smith is best known for his famous work on modern economics, the title of which is commonly abbreviated to The Wealth of Nations. The Wealth of Nations was first published in 1776, the same year that James Watt brought forward his improved steam engine and the American colonies declared their independence. There was even a student who studied Scottish Enlightenment thinkers at the universities of Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Aberdeen without graduating from college in Scotland, who was a signatory of the American Declaration of Independence and a major force in drafting the United States Constitution. His name was James Wilson, a Scotsman who moved to Philadelphia in 1765 when it was still British America. Upon his arrival in Philadelphia, he petitioned for and received his Master of Arts degree, where he was tutoring, then teaching at the Academy and College of Philadelphia, and later received the honorary Doctor of Law degree of LL.D. from the same institution. He was elected to the Continental College and was a delegate to the 1787 Philadelphia Convention. There he served as one of the 5 members of the Committee of Detail, which produced the first draft of the United States Constitution. In 1789, he became one of the first justices of the U.S. Supreme Court, and in August of 1798 became the first Supreme Court justice to die after suffering a stroke. 2 more things about Glasgow before I move on. The development of places in Glasgow like George Square, named after King George III, was said to have started in the 1820s. And we are told that by the 1880s, fine classical buildings, described as statements of power, wealth, and confidence, started appearing along fine new streets. Also in the same time period, in contrast with the proud classical buildings that started to appear in Glasgow, there was a population explosion from natural increase, migration, and boundary extensions as surrounding areas were annexed to Glasgow. This led to a problem with urban squalor and public health crises with epidemics of cholera, typhus, and typhoid. This picture was taken by Thomas Annan in Glasgow's Salt Market in 1868. The last thing I want to bring your attention to that I found in Glasgow is Teacher's Scotch Whisky. William Teacher established his whiskey product in 1830 and by the 1850s began to open public houses known as dram shops, in which customers could drink whiskey. The main attraction of the dram shops was their reputation for providing customers with high-quality whiskey. Jack Daniel's is a brand of Tennessee whiskey and the top-selling American whiskey in the world. Jack Daniel was said to have been born in either 1849 or 1850, and in the course of the events of his life, he opened his whiskey distillery in Lynchburg, Tennessee in 1884. Alcohol is classified as a central nervous system depressant, meaning that it slows down brain function and neural activity. Alcohol proof is the measure of the content of ethanol in alcoholic beverages. We're talking 70 proof and over for the different products made by the Jack Daniel's distillery. There are many other examples of the heavy promotion of drinking alcohol and the use of other addictive substances, like smoking opium in opium dens, that were taking place during this same time period. I have definitely come to believe that the focus was primarily on the intentional creation and promotion of addictions to keep humanity stuck in a lower, diminished level of consciousness, and one way of keeping people from waking up to what has actually taken place here. An addiction is a compulsive, chronic, physiological, and psychological need for a habit-forming substance, behavior, or activity having harmful effects. The next place I'm going to look into from a comment is the Isle of Fristland, also known as Fristland, the specific awareness of which is new to me. The Isle of Fristland appears on virtually all maps of the North Atlantic between the 1560s through the 1660s. Nonetheless, it has come down to our historical time period as a phantom island, meaning that it was removed from later maps as it was proven not to exist. This is Gerardus Mercator's depiction of Fristland that appears on a map that was published in 1606 by Jacobus Hondius, a few years after Mercator's death in 1594, in the lower left corner between Iceland to the northeast and Greenland to the northwest, which I found on the National Geographic website, seriously doubting Fristland's existence. The Zeno map that the article is referring to was said to have been first published in a book in 1558, after having been found in the family home by a direct descendant of the Zeno brothers, Niccolo and Antonio Zeno, Venetian noblemen famous during the Renaissance for exploring the Arctic in the 1390s, with an explorer prince named Szymon, lord of the islands off the southern coast of Fristland. We are told that the existence of the Isle of Fristland, as identified by the Zeno brothers, was given credibility in manuscript maps in the 1560s by the Genoan Maggiolo family, and accepted by leading cartographers and publishers of the 1500s and 1600s, like Mercator and Hondius, even though the charting of Fristland on the Zeno map was later deemed incorrect. I have my suspicions from my research about the role of cartographers, like Gerardus Mercator, in altering our perception of how we view the world in which we live, as contrasted with how the ancients viewed the world. This is the Catalan Atlas, which is said to date from 1375 and considered the height of medieval map work and the most important map of the medieval period in the Catalan language. Each section of the Catalan Atlas includes the mapping of the geometric lines and shapes that you see depicted here. It would seem that the Earth's grid lines started to disappear from maps in the 1500s, as Gerardus Mercator, a Flemish geographer, cartographer, and cosmographer, published a world map in 1569 that is considered to be the first where sailing courses on the sphere were mapped to the plane map, allowing for a correction of the chart to be more useful for sailors. Here's a close-up section of the 1569 map showing the depiction of straight ley lines in the seas. but not on land and sea as were present in the flat projections of the Catalan Atlas. Not only that, Mercator was also a globe maker, like this one from 1541. So Mercator was said to have made a revolutionary flat projection map that corrected the chart for sailors. And the Earth as a globe as well? I have to ask the question, is this information telling us something about what was actually going on here? While the focus of my research is not about proving or disproving flat Earth versus planet, nor am I directed by it, I do find this information about older maps on flat plains with ley lines to be extremely interesting and noteworthy. Back to the Isle of Fristland. The Isle of Fristland has been identified with a lost ancient land named Hyperborea by the Greeks, considered to have been in the general vicinity of Greenland, identified as Outland by the Frisians, a Germanic ethnic group indigenous to coastal parts of the Netherlands and northwestern Germany, and again identified as Fristland by Mercator. In Greek mythology, Hyperborea was a fabulous world of eternal spring located in the far north, beyond the home of the north wind. Hyperboreans were giants, with blessed and long lives untouched by war, hard work, old age, and disease. At any rate, there are some interesting similarities between the coastline of the now called Phantom Island of Fristland in Mercator's depiction on the left, and this depiction I found of the island of Hyperborea on the right. The Oralinda Bach, or book, is a manuscript that is written in Old Frisian and said to provide historical, mythological, and religious themes of remote antiquity. Like the doubt about the Isle of Fristland itself, the Oralinda Bach is widely considered a hoax. The manuscript first came into public awareness, we are told, in the 1860s. The book is still occasionally brought up in esotericism and Atlantist literature. I received a comment from someone who lives in St. Louis, Missouri, where there are industries for beer, like the castle-looking Anheuser Busch Brewery, the aerospace industry, like Boeing, and starting in 1942, St. Louis was an integral part of the Manhattan Project, for which Mallinckrodt Chemical Works processed a majority of the uranium needed for the first atomic bomb in their plant north of downtown St. Louis, and which continued to process uranium until 1957. When the chemical company ran out of space to store its nuclear waste on site, nuclear waste was dumped in places like a site near the St. Louis airport and the West Lake Landfill, a Superfund cleanup site. Needless to say, St. Louis has a nuclear waste problem. There was an electric streetcar system in St. Louis that ran from the mid-1800s through the early 1960s, starting with horse-drawn streetcars in the late 1850s. This is a map depicting the streetcar lines in St. Louis by 1884. With the first cable-driven streetcars in 1886 and the first electrified streetcars coming to St. Louis in 1889. The Forest Park Highlands Amusement Park opened as a beer garden in St. Louis in 1896 and was on a trolley line. On July 19th of 1963, all of the Forest Park Highlands Amusement Park was destroyed by fire, except for the swimming pool and the frame of the roller coaster. With regards to streetcars, starting in the early 1930s through the 1960s, the St. Louis Public Service ended all streetcar service, as well as other regional streetcar operators. The last day of St. Louis streetcar operation was May 21st of 1966. I will end this video with the Gateway Arch and National Park in St. Louis, the world's tallest arch at 630 feet or 192 meters high, which from one direction very neatly frames The old St. Louis courthouse, said to have been built as a federal-style courthouse, with its construction starting in 1816 and ending in 1864, which would have been during the American Civil War. The old courthouse is part of the Gateway Arch National Park today. This is a view of the rotunda inside the courthouse. From the other direction, the Gateway Arch frames its underground visitors center, which houses offices, mechanical rooms, and waiting areas for the arch trams, and the Museum of Westward Expansion. I remember learning about Manifest Destiny in secondary school history. I don't remember if it was junior high or high school. Manifest Destiny was a widely held, what is described as imperialist cultural belief in the United States in the 19th century that American settlers were destined to expand across North America. What we are not taught about was the highly advanced ancient civilization that had already existed in North America. We are told the Gateway Arch was constructed between 1963 and 1965 at a cost of $13 million at the time, which equaled the value of $80.6 million in 2018, after a history of fundraising difficulties, delays, and lawsuits. I wonder about the truth about a lot of the things we are told in this historical narrative. In my next video, I will continue to look into places that have been suggested by commenters. I already have a long list of places to look into, so if you have places you want to suggest to me, it may have to go on a waiting list for a future video. It just depends. My project to-do list is growing.